All right, Athlete Builder back at it. And as always, we're brought to you by the AEA Institute, where we are working with the Mental Edge Academy. Check us out for our summer boot camps. We are working on mental performance for high school, college, and pro teams. Hit me up if you want to know more about that. Today, we got Pete. And I met Stan Schofield recently at the Parisi Summit a few weeks back, and Pete works with Stan. After talking with Stan a few times, asked him for, hey, do you have anyone that we should talk to? And Pete came highly recommended. He played college football, was at Springfield. Shout out Adam Fight. I don't know if you know him, Pete, but he was on our show recently. He's a professor there and also strength and conditioning world. He's a pretty legit dude. Learned a lot from him. So there are ties there. Played different sports growing up, but went to football and then graduated, got his master's, and then started traveling around the NFL and other high-level colleges, making an impact. And the thing about working in pro sports or even college sports is that you must be mobile because the tenure and longevity isn't always that long and certain. So Pete, from what I can tell, decided he wanted to opt for some stability with his wife and a growing family. Went back home, hooked up with Stan. He's in Maine right now, making an impact with student athletes. So we're here to talk to Pete today about his journey. Going to find out the positives and negatives or the pluses and minuses of working with high-level athletes and teams and how that's translating down to what we do, working on the youth athletes. So, Pete, welcome to the show today.
Thanks for having me.
Should be a good time. Pete, one of the questions I like to ask our guests is as they advance in athletics, there's usually some holy shit moment. This is a lot different. And as you go from high school to college, and even from college, you start working within the NFL and other higher level colleges. As a player, then later as a coach, what were one or two of those?
Definitely as a player going from Maine high school football, which is a little different, where you think, I've talked to this about a few people, like you don't realize different levels of athletics as you start traveling down the state, especially in football. If you're, no offense to Maine football, but if you're, a high level Maine high school football player, it can be a lot different than if you're in, even you get down to Massachusetts, you start traveling down to Carolinas, Texas, Florida. Um, just seeing from even going from, playing my Maine high school football to going to college in Massachusetts, playing with guys who are from, New York, New Jersey. Like, okay, I was a great player in Maine, and all of a sudden, get seniors that have been there. They're 22, 23 years old, and you have your first practice, and it's like, okay, this is a little different than, when I was playing in Maine. So that was one of the big ones playing wise.
What
And then
position did you play?
I was a outside linebacker.
So how was that when you're going up against some of the older guys that are on offense and you're running with the defense and you go up against the ones?
Yeah, so definitely not running with the ones my first freshman year. And at Springfield College, they run triple option, so I'm playing defense, and we didn't play against a triple at all in high school. And that was, linebacker guards come down, they cut your legs out. So just run along normal, do nothing as a freshman in college, and you just get your legs cut out day after day after day. So you really got to question yourself. You're like, this is something I want to do where I have, 300 some pound guard running down, cleaning out your legs every single practice and you got buddies just here to play, or buddies here in college just having a good time, and you're out in the field getting your ass kicked every day. So that was kind of like, okay, this is something I want to do. Is something I want to, do my 4 years of college, but I'm glad I did stick with it from just the lessons I learned and, people I met and development I had. But that was definitely a change going from high school to college, playing wise.
Sure. Then you start working with and coaching people in the strength and conditioning world, and you go, what I wrote down here is the Bills and the Giants, two New York teams. What was the moment there where you're like, oh man, this is absolutely completely different level of athlete and coaching and expectations and pressure?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing is just from a standpoint of being like a young coach, you kind of go into it like, oh my gosh, like these are the guys I saw on TV, and you're trying to take it all in. But at the end of the day, they are, just people as well. And some of the things, obviously these guys are stronger, faster, but from a weight room standpoint, I still think that there was, just think someone's this amazing athlete that there's going to be doing these crazy things in the weight room. And that wasn't always the case. You'd have certainly some guys who would, put up some crazy numbers, squatting, benching, whatever it may be. Just from a standpoint of like, okay, like this guy can't bench 225. This guy, can't squat 315. But then you see him on the field and there's just unbelievable things they could do from a output standpoint of sprinting, jumping, playing their sport. And then just the realization of like, okay, when I'm in this, these are, grown men with families and this is their career. And there's some guy getting drafted who's trying to take their spot every single day, take their job. So just from the competition standpoint of like, okay, I go into preseason with 90 people on a roster and then cuts get down to 50. So you cut half the team in preseason. And then from there, only 47 dress for a game, just from the standpoint of, okay, NFL career is 2 to 3 years if you're lucky. And then every single day they're trying to draft people, trade for people to take your spot, be able to stay, at that level, at that performance day in and day out. There's always some pressures that come with that. Um, Injury prevention standpoint, performance standpoint, and everything else they have going on in their life as well.
Gotcha. Can you highlight maybe a story or two or a thought that where there was an athlete at any level that got by really well on their natural abilities and didn't really have to work very hard
Yeah.
versus someone else who, like, wasn't nearly as athletic or as sound, but was in the weight room and also in the film room and did all the other things and made up for it that way. Just because there are different kinds of athletes, and some have to do more in the weight room, some have to do more with their nutrition, some have to do more with their film, some have to do less. So there's different kinds that make it to the top, and different ways are okay. So we're looking for talk about the different ways people made it to the top.
Yeah. And I was talking about this some the other day that for some athletes, it might catch up to you when you get to college. Like, okay, I was dominant in high school. I didn't have to do technique work. I didn't have to learn plays, and I could go out there and just play. And then all of a sudden, I get to college, and I'm with people who are similar level, if not better than me. I get to know my assignments. I get to know my film. I'm not as strong as everyone. I can't get away with just natural ability. And then sometimes it catches up to people in the NFL where, okay, I'm still this high level athlete and I could still get away in college without doing certain things as well. And I get to the league and now it's like, hey, I even at a higher level and I can't get away with certain things I can, so that I can do. I think at Iowa, when I was at Iowa, there was really good at development of athletes. There was a number of athletes that came in that, walk on 8-man football that they had no business playing college football. And through development of 4, 5, 6 years, sticking with scout teams, sticking with, putting on weight, we'd recruit guys that were tight ends and move to tackles. And by the end of 6 years, they've developed themselves every single day through the weight room, through practice, through development. I can think of guys like Jake Gervais, who came in, walk on safety, made it to the league, won a Super Bowl. Anthony Nelson, Matt Nelson, still playing in the league. Guys who came in as, 200-pound tight ends. Now they weigh, 300 plus pounds. And then just the standpoint that you don't see as much in college, I think, from an NIL standpoint, where it's okay, if I'm not playing my freshman year, like I'm transferring, I'm doing those other things. So to have the resiliency of, okay, I'm going to be here for 5, 6 years. I'm not going to play my freshman year, my sophomore year, but I'm going to come every single day and work, in the weight room. I have to work on putting on weight, my nutrition, mentally, physically, and just be able to see that from, a couple different places at Indiana. The guy comes to mind at Texas A&M, Torian York, who just signed to the Broncos, comes to mind that they maybe not the most talented or most highly recruited, but just through training, perseverance, and working hard that they were able to make it to the next level.
You see both sides though, like you said, if they don't have success immediately for some,
Yeah.
they could transfer or they could just drift away. And if you read Tim Grover's Winning, Winning doesn't really care, right? Doesn't really care about you. It cares about the results, whether you drift away or not. There's someone else to fill that spot all the time. Yeah, I gotta believe after I've sent kids to play college sports or worked with college athletes, the expectations are just not ever right. So you said coming from Maine to another school in Massachusetts, The expectation is what you see around you, right? And the expectation could be, I don't need to do more, or I do. And for some, they just can't make that switch, or if they're humbled, they can't be okay with that and then digging in. But you also talked about kids that were walked on that made it to the league, right? So completely different. And in both cases, it's nothing more than mindset, right? It's all choice. I'm going to handle it this way. Once I'm hit with adversity, I'm either going to put in this process, which leads towards washing out, or this other process towards staying alive and advancing. And I think if you and I could have the magic pill or the magic formula for recognizing that and working with it, we'd be a lot wealthier than we are. But if you can identify certain trends or characteristics of those guys that stuck with it, any commonalities that you saw?
Um, this makes me think of one of my favorite books, The Slight Edge. People see this huge goal, this huge thing in front of them, like, okay, this is where I am now. I'm, like the eighth linebacker on the depth chart, and I want to be in the NFL, and it's just too daunting of a task. But if they can break it up and look at, okay, so if I can do these small little things each day, if I show up and I do, the best that I can in the weight room, if I watch 15 minutes of film, if I eat my calories I'm supposed to eat for the day, if I stay after practice for 5 minutes, these were things that just added up over the course of days, over the course of weeks, the course of months, the course of years. So the time where I come in and I've done, 5 extra minutes of film a day, and that adds up to, like 30 minutes a week. And then I'm up to hours over the month. I'm up to, hundreds of hours over years. So by the time I'm, a junior or senior, I've watched 100 hours of film, hundreds of hours of film. I've spent countless extra hours working on my skills. I've given my all every single day in the weight room. I've stayed consistent with my nutrition. I've gained whatever I had to gain weight, gain muscle. If I gained a half a pound, a week, a pound a week, 2 pounds a week, whatever I needed to do, where I am from, I am now to I am in 3 years. And I think some of the things that those people were able to do instead of just looking at this big picture was break it down into small increments and be like, okay, this is what I need to do today. This is what I need to do this week. And this is what I need to do this month. And if I can do these little things each and every day, then that puts a huge dent of where I am, in years from now. And I think that's something that's hard for a young athlete to do. You go into college and you get all these different changes going on, and being able to look at like these small things. How's this 5 minutes of extra catching after practice going to make me an NFL athlete when I'm, like the 10th receiver on the depth chart? But the ones who are able to persevere and have the discipline to do that. And I know it's talked about a lot, but like motivation, a lot of people are motivated when they get there. I'm at a big school, wherever I am, and I want to be the best, but all of a sudden it's like that motivation fades pretty quick. So to have the discipline to do these things day in and day out is what I think really separates certain athletes from people who make it and people who don't.
Sure. Yep. The climbing the mountain analogy is that you look at the top and you're like, man, how do I get there? Right. Or I'm eighth on the depth chart and I want to play in the league where you're not even running with the ones or the twos. How do I get there? See, people will look at this target, this moment, this tangible exterior thing, and that's what becomes their psyche and focus versus what you said. Well, I've been getting up at 6:30. How about I just get up at 6? That's an action item. There's a verb there. I get up. I do something. I answer the question, now what? So if I can do that, then there's something I can do. I'm in control. I'm in control of my world. I have ownership over it. It gives me some hope because I'm now doing these extra things. It's the extra work. I think also that the athlete and coach that can identify the limiting weakness, like if you're dealing with, and then you coach athletes at a pre-C school, that's an outstanding school, or I'm sorry, your own performance school. Kids come in there and they work on their sport all the time, but are usually pathetically weak, and they'll keep working on their sport, fifth grade, fourth grade, third grade on up. And at some point, they go to college and they've been weak because they never took any time to build anything. And I'll have these idiots come in and be like, "Hey, man, we're gonna do some 2 or 3 weeks of strength building, over the winter." And there's 49 other weeks, and I'm like, and then another year goes by, and you did 3 weeks of strength training over the winter, which is gone 3 weeks later. and another year goes by. Next thing you know, shit, you're 18, you're still weak, dumbass. Like,
Yep.
who's making the decision there? And you could scream in their faces, and they're like, "Well, I'm never gonna miss a practice, so great. You're just going to practice every year, year in and year out, week." My god. So, I think you're right. You take the focus on something tangible on the outside exterior, and you focus on action items of what to do. But the other piece is you gotta be s there's only so many hours in a day, you have only so much capacity. You gotta bring up that weakness, otherwise it's always a weakness. What do you guys see now that it's one thing training D1 and pro level athletes. Now you guys work down into, like, the younger ages all the way to high school and hopefully go to college and play a sport, but sometimes not. How is that transition of, "Hey, man, we're dealing with these guys. Now we're dealing with people like they couldn't box squat if you paid them, right? They have no idea what's going on."
Yeah. So at our gym, we have the 8 to 12, our youth program, our Preezy Speed School program. And then we have a 13 plus program, which is 13 all the way up into, college, where it's more comprehensive. We're going over warm up, speed, plyometric, strength training. But like you said, kind of not all athletes fault on their own, but kind of where sports are now at the youth level, that it is showcase, it's tournaments, it's playing 24/7, and training and everything else is kind of an afterthought. So just seeing these injuries some of these kids have now, which you used to see like working in college and older athletes, some of the injuries they have, you see some of these overuse injuries now in like 12 or 13-year-old kids. It's like, okay, this isn't good. And then talking about strength training, like you said, it's like, okay, we have, basketball, baseball, soccer, whatever it may be, and we got a 2-week gap here in the summer. We're going to do our strength training then. Okay, it's not going to work either. And then the third part of it is parents asking about sports specific training when they do their strength. So not only we're playing sports year round, but a 12-year-old doesn't need a sports specific training program. They need to learn how to squat, learn how to hinge, learn how to lunge, learn how to press. And I think that is just kind of misconception. And then another part of that is talking about this is kind of an old thing where it's like, okay, it's going to stunt my growth in a 12, 13-year-old. It's going to cause, developmental delays. But if you think about, and more research is coming out, the forces that these athletes experience, whether you're swinging, you're throwing, you're changing direction, you're jumping, are going to be much, much greater than anything you experience in the weight room. And the weight room is going to be something that helps prepare them for this to help reduce the likelihood of injury. So just a lot of misconceptions, I think, about training in the youth, and then just what the benefits can be from a youth training standpoint to not only help, you know, injury reduction, not going to say injury prevention because you're not going to prevent injury, but all these things that come along, which can help, improve physical enhancement from a speed, a power, agility standpoint, physical development from bone density, cognitive benefits of like neuromuscular outputs, and then just mental benefits of these kids play these sports year round and it's all wins or losses. And I think some of these kids don't have, they talk about it, they don't have the confidence in certain things because it's all about wins or losses. Whereas during training, you can kind of see some tangible evidence of, okay, I'm getting stronger, I'm getting faster, and that makes you a lot more confident when you go out on the court or the field, which a lot of these kids don't get too, because it's like, I get a couple of bats a day. If I'm having a bad week, a bad month, then, that's what my performance is.
Yep, yep. All true points, all true points. It's hard for people to understand that if you wanna exert force, you have to also absorb force, and every time they jump and land, they're absorbing force, and they don't do that very well, things break. And to your point on confidence, if you're relying ready to tee off with a bunch of pretty decent golfers and you haven't played in a couple of years, you know you're gonna feel a certain way. If you play weekly, you play in a group league, and then you go to the range 2 or 3 times a week, and you've been doing that for 3 or 4 years, you're gonna feel a completely different way. So when you have that kid that learns how to handle fears in the weight room, like getting underneath a bar for a squat, or they can see that their broad jump is expanding, they're getting more powerful, and they see that, "Hey, the scale is changing, but my body looks, not but it still looks lean, so I'm getting heavier, but I'm still lean." You start stacking all these wins nutritionally, muscularly, then they're like, "Okay." I go, "Hey, buddy, you've done all this these last several years, when you go into this year's off season or this year's practice or this year's camp, man, just let it rip, right? Because they've done all the things to earn the confidence. But otherwise, they just show up and, boy, I hope I'm better this year. I hope I swing better in the batter's box. I hope. And when all they've done is practice and practice and practice, they might hit the ball well. They just can't hit it out of the infield.
Yeah, and I think their worth just comes down to whether if I'm hitting the ball well, I'm throwing well, where there's all these other things like you get from a weight room, you get from something else that you don't get in sports as well.
If you learn all the other lessons, because it's still only 7% play in college, only 2% play D1, but you learn how to eat correctly and apply that. If you learn how to recover from an injury or recover from a hard session of training, and you can apply that. And if you can learn how to lift and then apply that the rest of your life, whether you're busy because you have your own kids or you're a CPA during tax season, you understand the physical benefits of what you're doing, and they're going to apply later. So I know everyone wants to win, and that's great. But if you can't learn how to win then, it's super hard. And trust me, because I was just super fat and out of shape, couldn't squat or bench my own weight, couldn't run a mile in my 30s, and then had this bottom out moment that no matter what, you start applying these lessons the rest of your life because this is how you want to live for longevity. There's a ton of value there. There's a ton of value there because these kids aren't playing in college. There's still only 2% play D1. And you'll see a lot of these schools will say, we're not even taking high school kids anymore. There's so many kids in the portal. There's no sense for me even taking a high school kid. So they're just drafting from other schools. What do you talk about now that you, like, even I'm sure you still saw it at the higher level, but when you're coaching kids and they hit some PR that they've been working on, whether it's a trap bar deadlift or they ran a fly 10 better, don't you see the childlike joy in their faces when that happens? Like, and they come back or they go and tell their parents or they come back and like, hey man, they ring a bell. We have a bell in our gym that hit a PR, and we have a jujitsu girl. Like she deadlifted finally like almost 1.5 times her body weight, and she was just like the girl doesn't lose on the weekends in jujitsu, but she hits this deadlift and she was just like, oh my god, I did it. Talk about that and the reward.
Yeah. Um, and I think this goes back to kind of like my why and what got me back into here as well. College, it got a lot into just like, okay, I need to win this game, need to lose this game, we need to win this game, or we could be getting fired or whatever it may be. And it became less about athletes and more about just winning games. And that's what, touch my wife when we got home. We need to win this game. We need to do this and do this. And now it's when I get home talking about, so and so just PR'd on this, so and so, did this. They, whatever it may be. And I think it's so awesome to see some of these kids where they come in and they have these goals of, okay, I want to get faster. I want to hit a certain vertical jump, or it's like never thought about deadlifting in their life. And they're doing like, oh my goodness, I just went over 200 pounds on deadlift, and just how excited they get to do these certain things. And that's, I know, a huge part of what I do, the other coaches as well. And we talk about it like when we do bright spots of the week, when we have a staff meeting. And these are a lot of things that people bring up during the week that they think about of like, so and so did this week. They hit this in the trap bar. They did this on their sprints. And just, you wouldn't think how excited they are to do this when they first came in. And now this is like a huge part of what they do and what they get excited about. And that's an awesome thing to see.
Awesome. Love that. I want to get into growth mindset and a couple other things here in a minute, but I had this new game and it's the adult version of truth or dare, but we're going to play lesson or story. And I'm going to say lesson or story. You got to pick one and then I'm going to go from there.
So we got story.
All right. Story. So give me a story from Florida State and your time there.
Story of Florida State. There's a bunch because that was my first experience with college football, like big time college football. And I didn't really know what to, expect going into it, with the pressures of it, everything else. I was at a D3 school, interned, worked at like NFL level, and obviously like understood that. But from a standpoint of like college football, college town, and everything that goes into that. And the season that I walked into was kind of like a make or break season, kind of a bad season the year before. So at college football, you get two in a row of those, and you're probably not going to be around for very long. So I went down there with like, okay, this is my job now. I'm gonna be working at Florida State. This is awesome. So we're like 8 months in, and all of a sudden, ESPN reports come out that Coach Fisher probably might leave at the end of the year. And I'm like, what does that mean for me? Oh, yeah, it's like, I don't know. We weren't even close. We still had 2 regular season games left. We were about 8 months into moving all the way from our life from New Jersey, New England area, all the way down to Florida. And then we're sitting in the office and all of a sudden an ESPN report breaks that the Coach Fisher is leaving for Texas A&M. So at that time, didn't really know what that meant for me, but now I know that's, hey, I'm either leaving or getting fired. We finished out the year there, and then I was looking for a job. And that was like, okay, this is college sports, I guess. It's like, first leaves, you leave. But that was my first taste and first experience of like, okay, this is how fast things can go and things can change quickly in college sports, and, kind of what your game plan has to be.
Dang, so that's under 12 months. And I see Texas A on the resume. So story or lesson from there.
So I guess two would be going to Texas A&M. So I'm at Indiana University, and I had a great position there and great people that I worked with there. And someone I worked with at Florida State now got the head job at Texas A&M, and he gives me a call and asks if I want to go to Texas A&M with him. So that was a tough decision for a few reasons. One, the people I worked with at Indiana, Aaron Wellman, who's mentor to me and someone that, had the biggest impact on me in strength conditioning and outside of strength conditioning, and some of the other coaches I worked with there. But it was, again, progression in the field. I wanted to continue to grow as a coach. And then the other part of that was that me and my wife just had a daughter, and she was 7 weeks old. So we were like, so what do you think about moving to Texas? And she's like, what? So we moved to Texas. My daughter was 8 weeks old. So my wife, we had to sell our house, pack up our house, move to Texas. So then we're at Texas, and now we're 2 years, a little over 2 years into it. It is my daughter's second birthday now. So great weekend. We got a bounce house. Some of the family came up, and we had just beat Mississippi State by like 50 points. Was a decent season we had. So like, all right, this is good. Going into next year, we got one regular season game left, and all of a sudden my wife's on social media and her face just goes white. She's like, oh my God. I'm like, what's wrong? And she's like, we're getting fired. And the news started breaking that they were going to fire the football coach, and which in turns means the whole staff gets fired as well. On my daughter's second birthday, let's remember that.
Mm,
And just after we won by 50 points, we find out at the end of the year we'll be getting fired, be looking for a job again. Had all our family up there. That was definitely an awkward time for them as well, but that was kind of like, okay, this is, I'd obviously had some good times there at Texas A&M, but again, this was like, okay, it was really got me thinking about if this is what I want to do now that I have a family, or, do I continue looking for the next job? This is like, I guess, the point where I finally started thinking about, what's next after this? Is it another strength and conditioning job in college? Do I look for something else? That was kind of a big turning point in my career.
dang. So game day, Florida State, you got the guy Seminole riding in on the horse, right? Texas A&M has the 12th man. Iowa, they're waving to that children's hospital after I think the third quarter. IU has those candy cane pants. The Bills have the Bills Mafia. The Giants are the New York Football Giants. And talk about the game day craziness that you'll see Saturday and Sunday or Sunday in the college and NFL level that you just don't see in other sports, that it'll totally consume a college town or a whole populace.
Yeah, I mean, it is, and you don't realize it until you're actually in a town like that, of how like just consumed everything is, from like businesses, from like the whole city, the, game day. And that's what kind of the focus is, especially in the football season, where just thinking about like a game weekend, we're playing on Saturday. It's like Wednesday and Thursday, and RVs start showing up to camp out. Students are lined up like, mile long in tents, waiting for tickets. It's been talked about all week. And then, especially on game day, way like Texas A&M, you have 100,000 plus students and fans in the stadium, like every single game, whether we're doing well, whether we're not. Same thing with Iowa. That place sold out and was rocking every single game. And it was just a crazy experience that you don't really understand until you're in it, where it's like that's something you miss too, where you have these well when you're winning games, but just from the standpoint of you don't realize how rocking these places getting, how it consumes the student body, it consumes fans, the town, the city. And when you're doing well, it's like changes the whole aspect of businesses, vibe of where you are as opposed to when you're doing well and it's doomsday. But it really was an awesome experience to, play at Ohio State, play at Texas A&M, Alabama night game, played at a whiteout at Penn State. Some things that, people won't get to experience being on the sideline for games like that. And that's something that, memories I'll have. And I'm really appreciative that I got to go to some of those places like that.
Yeah, if you have college game day, it just keeps getting bigger and bigger, or a big noon Saturday, and like that just brings out more and more folks. Like there's people like my daughter goes to Alabama, and she's graduating here this semester, and she's like, if college game day shows up, there's people that like the game will still sell out, but people will still be at college game day like lining up the night before,
Yeah.
and businesses will shut down so they can watch or attend. And it just like in Alabama, there's nothing else. There's Auburn, there's Alabama, and then there's Birmingham, but there's no pro teams
Yeah.
for any sport. So those are the pro teams for the entire state. And it's like 90% Bama, 10% Auburn. It just gets to be crazy, but super fun. Like
Yeah.
even my mother-in-law and father-in-law, they're in their 70s and they don't miss Pat McAfee. They think he's the coolest guy ever. And they're like 76 and they're sitting there watching, drinking a beer at noon. But like, oh man, Pat's going to jump off this diving board down at University of Miami, and they'll be calling us, hey, did you see that? And like it transcends different generations.
Yeah.
So, yes, this isn't a good transition, but it's still going to be the transition. One of the things you wrote down about being a good teammate is having a growth mindset. So, first, I wanted you to define for us what does that mean in terms of what you're building with athletes, a growth mindset?
Yeah. I think from a standpoint of myself, a growth mindset where I go through and like as a strength coach, you have a certain mindset of how things should be done, certain lifts, certain way you do speed work, conditioning, whatever it may be. And as a young strength coach, think you know a lot of things and you're set in your ways. And that was one of the beneficial things of working at a number of different places to see like all the different ways things can be done and how they work at different levels and they can be done well doing different things. They don't have to be done, just because someone says this or just because this is what I thought, but being able to take different things from different places and expand upon that and realize like, okay, there's more than one thing, more than one way to get this done. And then just from an athlete standpoint of, you know, kind of talked about it earlier, but where I am now and where I want to be and how I kind of break this up. And when we do have athletes coming here for the first time, we sit down and we talk about training goals and makes them think about, okay, this is where, these training goals have. I want to get faster. I want to get stronger. I want to have better agility. And then we talk about if you do these things, like you get stronger, you get faster, you have better agility. What's a goal you have for yourself in the next year, the next, year and a half in your sport? And how are these things going to help you, reach that goal? And what are the steps we're going to take to get there? And really makes them think. I think the first time a lot of them have done goal setting and broke this down into, how am I going to do these things to get me to my goal? How am I going to get stronger? How am I going to get faster? How am I going to improve my agility? And how this is going to ultimately lead me to my goal of, making varsity as a freshman or being all conference, whatever it may be, and being stuck in the same mindset of this is how I did it before. This is how I'm going to continue to do it is not necessarily going to take them to where they want to be. So teaching them that is a big part of what we do as well.
Also, I find like with student athletes or just people in general, it's hard to know the all-encompassing process. So if I'm walking an athlete through it, I'll just start with their mindset. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? And I take a very basic tool, a SWOT analysis. And I'll say, what are your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats in your mindset? And then we'll go through and we'll highlight the differences. And then based on the responses, we're going to come up with some habits to work on to build their mindset. And then comes on the knowledge of their sport. Maybe you're really driven, but you don't know how to shoot left-handed or right-handed on a layup. Like, well, you're driven, but you got to learn some of the knowledge of your sport. So that could be the limiting factor. So we'll do the same thing there. And then, like, you might be driven and a great athlete, but maybe you're an asshole, right? So maybe it's a team, maybe you're a bad teammate. And that's the limiting factor. You can't work well with your teammates or the coaching staff or the support staff, GAs, family, friends, because like you're getting nowhere, Pete, traveling around from college to college if your wife wasn't supportive,
Yeah.
right? So you gotta have that teammate locked in right there. So if it's not in your head, then this leaves the body. Is it your training? Is it your nutrition or your recovery? So all three things in your head and all three things in your body, if you can go through a system like that and then point out, all right, kid, here is where we can move the needle. Like you train really hard, but you eat like an idiot.
Yeah.
Like how many kids skip breakfast? All right, that's an easy fix. Let's just start eating breakfast. But you got to have like a systematic process to identify what's holding them back. And most times the kid's not going to know because they're just not mature enough. They don't have the reps. Back to the growth mindset. How do you spin it or turn it around when you are working with someone and they got a real closed mindset? You start talking about sumo deadlift for building lateral mobility, and they're like, "Yeah, well, I don't do that because sumo deadlifts is stupid or whatever." So you find someone who's really close. How do you work to meet them and hopefully shift their mindset to a more growth oriented approach?
Yeah, and a lot of things to do, try to take it back to the sport they play or injuries they've had. I know we've get people in here who's like, we get a lot of baseball players and they've had, tendonitis in their elbow, they've had little league elbow, they've had shoulder problems. And it's like, no, I don't typically do shoulder care or band work or whatever it may be. And they have goals of, okay, I want to play in high school, I want to play in college. And this is where you're at now. You're not going to make it very far doing the things you're doing now because look, what's worse than, not being able to play your sport because you're injured because you don't want to do these certain things. And then just showing them, when we're doing these certain things, how it can make them feel if you know, doing some sort of mobility drill or finding common ground. It's like, hey, maybe this one is not great for them, but if I can find a mobility drill that's going to work the same thing that they're comfortable with, and then they can feel the difference of like how this made me feel, how this made me move. Similar with taking it back, which I'm able to do with certain athletes. Okay, this is someone I worked with. This is something that they did before, and this is what worked for them. Or having an older athlete, like, hey, this is where someone is, and they had the same sort of mindset that you did, and they were able to do these certain things, and they're at this level now. I think taking it to relating where they're at, I can think about where I was in high school and not wanting to do certain things or had certain views about lifting and training and realizing, okay, that could be me too that I'm talking to. So where I was in a mindset and, things that move the needle for me in terms of like, how's this going to get me better? How's this going to make me throw harder? How's this going to make me a better athlete? And kind of relating back to then. And then relating it to, whether it's a pro athlete, a college athlete, someone that's, in varsity right now and things that they do that they wish they did when they were, 12, 13, 14 years old. If they could go back and work on their nutrition, they could go work back on mobility, some of the strength work. So having those older guys talk to some of the younger guys or girls as well. And then when they're able to
Huge.
see some of these changes, I think that's when you get the buy-in where they actually see results and things like that.
Yeah. So you got to try to educate them, like you said.
Mhm.
And then, they might be like, man, you're 25-year-old or you're 28-year-old. What do you know? Or I heard, hey, you're my dad. What do you know? Even though two of my kids played in college. And so you give them some facts and maybe they believe you, maybe they don't. But maybe they need to hear it from someone else. Like you said, maybe it's from the seniors or alumni that come back and they say, hey, man, here's the reality. Everybody thinks they're different or they're special and they're really not. If you don't eat very well, you're not going to play very well for very long. So at some point, they make this leap of faith. All right, I'm going to trust coach, or I'm going to trust this older guy, or I'm going to trust the guys that played before me. And then they start to put those little habits into play and they see, holy cow, coach was right. Holy shit, he's not a dumbass, right? And so they have a little bit more confidence in you and more belief. Next thing you know, all right, now let's move forward. So just like anything else, like getting you to believe that you got to drive on the right side of the road versus the left as you get taught these things and they see, hey, this is the way it goes. And sooner or later they start to believe it, but it's still always going to be a process of doing that. What do you anything you miss about college and pro level coaching?
Yeah, there's certain things that I miss. I think more of that, team atmosphere where you've worked hard all off season. Think about like a football season where you have January off season, February, March, April, May, June, July, August. Most of your time is spent in the off season just training and working for these games. So when you get up to uh, you know, game day, they just mean so much. You get 12 a year. And like we talked about, like the lead up to games, the atmosphere there, and being able to go in and win a big game with a team that you train with for so hard for so long is just a really good feeling to see some of those athletes, excel at certain games and, go in and win a game like that. That's something they don't always get with, working with certain like private setting or whatever it may be. So I think that's a big part of it too, kind of that team atmosphere that you don't get always with anything else.
It's pretty rewarding though, even if you're coaching in the gym setting where someone goes to high school or college and they come back for a visit and they stop in, they've had some success, they share some stories because even your own story, you knew Schofield before you went to play in college, right?
Yeah. I'd say,
And
yeah,
so
two
you
things with that would be our athletes here, which is awesome, where like we track, okay, the things that they're doing in their high school seasons, when they go to college, what they're doing. Just when they come back and be like, okay, I had this goal when I came in, and a couple years later, I made, sectionals, I made whatever it may be. So that is something that definitely one of the biggest highlights of my job is to see athletes come in with this goal and able to meet it, whether it's a year from now, 2 years from now. And then from Schofield's standpoint, so it's like called something different, but when I was in high school a long time ago, I trained at the same gym I'm working at now, and Stan was working here, was managing the gym, and that's when I kind of fell in love with strength and conditioning. I really liked the training from a training standpoint. I learned about nutrition, and that's where I was like, okay, I want to do something with strength training. I want to do something with athletes. I don't know what it is, but I want to do something like this. And 12 years later, when I'm fired from Texas A&M, I'm calling up Stan, who I didn't have much connection with, but 12 years later, and we got right on a call and instantly clicked. And I'm really glad I did. It kind of came full circle. The place that I, started with learning about strength conditioning, fall in love with strength conditioning, training, nutrition, and then ended up back here, back where me and my wife are from, 12, 13 years later. It's been awesome.
gotcha, love it. If you're lifting yourself and you're getting after it, which is different when you're 20 versus 30, uh, but if you're getting after it on a training session, what do you like to listen to?
Typically, I listen to nothing when I train. Just and people think I'm crazy for this, but the amount
That's all right.
just being in a weight room for, 8 to 10 hours a day, listening to music, at home listening to different things. So being able to just train in silence, and that was and that's what I typically do if I'm in there by myself getting after it.
I totally agree. You hear this aggression all day long. Like if I'm driving home, I'll have like these big band or jazz on just to try to like decompress and get and turn everything down so I don't come in bite my wife's head off. What's a bucket list adventure? Just you and your wife, no kids, no one else, and you can't have done it before. Place you guys would like to go.
Let's see. We've been somewhere tropical, probably somewhere like Italy with my wife.
Fun. Are you near Acadia?
Not too far. Get to Acadia, yeah.
My wife and I went there once. We love national parks because we're
Yeah.
dorks and we like to hike, but had a great time out there. Went on this boat to um, pull up these lobster out of their
Yeah.
these baskets, and it was awesome. Favorite sports movie?
Miracle on Ice.
Okay. Favorite sport to watch?
Football.
Favorite athlete? It could be alive, could be dead, it doesn't matter.
Um, Favorite athlete. I would say, I don't know. Favorite athlete I worked with, I can think of Cam Jones, not like well-known athlete, but one of the awesome guys I worked with.
Awesome. Favorite book? You got a book recommendation?
In terms of just not strength and conditioning, Unbroken. Really good book.
Is that Samperini?
Yes. Yeah.
So, my God, like just when you think he's kind of about to get a little bit better deal, it gets worse.
It does
When you
every
think
single time.
when you think he's gonna die out there in the water and he finally gets saved, oh man, things are gonna start picking up.
Prisoner
No,
camp.
prisoner camp. And then when he changed camps, oh, this is gonna be better. No,
Yeah.
my God, talk about amazing.
Yeah.
Superhero could be live and real, could be fictional.
My wife.
You said that because she's gonna be listening to this, isn't he, right? That's why you said that,
Hopefully,
right?
maybe she will, but definitely is between all the things I've put her through and moves and kids, and so
How about a villain?
big fan of the Batman series, so the Joker,
Which version?
the newer ones.
Okay.
Awesome.
So I like Heath Ledger, that'd be my favorite Joker. Favorite lift?
Squat.
Most you've ever done?
Most ever done probably when I was graduate assistant, like 415.
Nice. You a fan of the box squat?
I am.
Yeah, me too. Most people are, much better with their quads, so now I can develop their hips and their glutes, like big vertical shins. Uh, alright. You have a quote for us?
I think I don't know who this is from, but one that I've kind of gone from is under promise, over deliver, and lead from the front.
Beautiful. Where can we find you? Where can we find Schofield Sports Performance? Where are you guys at?
So Schofield Sports Performance, we have our website, Schofield Sports Performance on Google. Stan puts out a blog pretty much every week too, which is great information for all athletes and parents. We have our Twitter, so Schofield Sports Performance, Instagram, and personally, my name, Pete Remmes, on Twitter and Instagram as well.
And it's Remmes, Remmes, everybody.
Correct.
And as always, you can email us at info@athlete-builder.com. Hit me up for the Mental Edge Academy. Our summer boot camp starts June 1, where we added even more value, where we're doing things where we're coaching the captains, we're coaching the coaches on burnout, and we're helping them come up with their identity series for the fall sports. So hit us up for that. If you don't have a system in place for physical training, you don't have a system in place. And if you don't have a system in place for mental training, you don't have a system in place. So let's make sure we're working on that. Pete, great talking to you today. Enjoyed it. Learned a few things. Just had a lot of fun, and I knew when Stan recommended you, we would have a good time.
Yeah, appreciate you having me on.
All right, Pete, have a good one. We'll talk to you later. See ya.
It's good.